Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that may ruin soup for you forever, or stew, or bread, or honestly, the entire concept of food. Welcome to the medieval kitchen, where meals are less about flavour and more about surviving whatever was writhing in your bowl. Before you lose your appetite completely, take a second to like this video and subscribe. But only if you enjoy casually spiralling into historical nightmares right before bed. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Midnight? Breakfast? Either way, I hope you're not eating. Dim the lights. Turn on a fan for that soft hum of comfort. Maybe light a candle, preferably not one made from rendered pig fat like they used back then. Let's begin. Congratulations, you've just regained consciousness in a time where hunger isn't a temporary inconvenience, it's a full-time lifestyle. The year is somewhere between 1250 and, oh god no. And you, lucky you, are a medieval peasant with a growling stomach and absolutely nothing to look forward to but a bowl of warm regret. You're lying on what might generously be called a bed, more accurately, a sagging sack of straw and rodent anxiety. Your body aches in places you didn't know had bones. Your teeth hurt, which is strange, because you're not even chewing anything yet. But don't worry, you will be soon, and you'll regret that too. Your first thought isn't about your name or your family, or even your crushing poverty. It's about food, not because you're excited, because you're scared. Because in the Middle Ages, food is an umbrella term that includes things like pig blood, moss paste, and last week's turnip stew that's been gently fermenting on the hearth. The only reason it hasn't grown legs and left is because the mould thinks it has squatters' rights. You sit up slowly, trying to remember what day it is, not because of scheduling, but because your life depends on it. Today might be a feast day, which means your lord might toss a dried eel or a crust of salted horse meat your way. Or it might be a fast day, which means water, prayers and air pie. There is no fridge. There is no pantry. Your family's food storage consists of a wooden bowl with something vaguely gelatinous inside it and a string of onions hanging from the rafters like medieval mistletoe. Except these onions are half rotten and guaranteed to make your breath smell like a dying goat. You're so hungry, your stomach is folding in on itself like a poorly scripted tragedy. But before you can eat, you have to find something edible. And that word, edible, has a different definition now. It doesn't mean delicious. It doesn't even mean safe. It means won't kill you instantly. Emphasis on instantly. You stumble toward the hearth, where yesterday's dinner is still congealed in a cracked pot. The fire is long dead, the stew is now the consistency of regret, and there's a crust forming on top that scientists in the modern era would call medically concerning. But you call it breakfast. You dip your fingers in, no spoon, and scoop out a blob. It jiggles in a way that shouldn't. The smell is sour, like sadness that's been boiled. You blow on it, not to cool it, but to try and blow the memory of what you're about to do out of your mind. It hits your tongue like betrayal. Chunky, gritty, slightly chewy in a way that suggests meat adjacent, but could also be the root of something that died underground or above ground. or inside your wall. You chew because you must. You swallow because spitting would be wasteful. You live with the shame forever. Outside, the sun rises behind a curtain of grey fog and chimney smoke. Somewhere, a rooster is screaming, probably because it knows it's next. You try not to gag as you grab a crust of bread, hard as brick, slightly green, possibly sentient, and gnaw at it like a punished squirrel. It tastes like punishment, like bark rolled in sand. The flour was mixed with ground acorns and desperation. The yeast, if it existed, clearly gave up halfway through the job. Welcome to your medieval appetite, and yet, this is your identity now. You're not a gourmand, you're not a chef, you're not even a customer. You're a scavenger in a world of edible pain. Your diet will be shaped by 4 things. What hasn't spoiled, what hasn't been stolen, what hasn't crawled away, what the church hasn't declared sinful this week. You eat because you must, not because you can. Hunger is the starting point of every decision, every prayer, and every existential crisis. This isn't a chapter of your life, this is your life. And dinner is probably snoring in the corner pen right now. Your fingers still smell like sour pottage. Your breath could knock over a mule. Your insides are already questioning your life choices, and the day hasn't even begun. And yet, this is normal. There is no menu. There are no preferences. You eat what's there. And if nothing's there, well, you go looking. Through the brush, through the compost, through the woods, if you're brave enough to risk being arrested for picking a royal mushroom. You're not a foodie, you're a survivor, and food is your enemy. You step outside, hoping the morning air will clear your head and not just coat your lungs with soot and livestock breath. The village smells like it's been slowly cooked in a soup of wet wool and expired sausage. You pass the food storage shed, a generous term for that damp corner where things go to rot. It's less a pantry and more a slow-motion garbage fire that occasionally feeds you. Inside, hanging from crooked nails and ancient string, are bundles of herbs so shriveled they could pass as curses, and a few dried fish that have clearly died more than once. There's meat in here, sort of. A chunk of something red-brown hangs from the rafters, glistening with grease and mystery. You poke it. It jiggles. It might be beef, might be dog, might be whatever wandered into the village last week and didn't leave fast enough. Flies buzz around it like tiny vultures. You don't shoo them away. You can't. They were here first, and they've unionised. The concept of fresh food in your time is more superstition than standard. You eat things based on smell, colour, and whether or not they've started talking back. That lump of cheese on the shelf? Not cheese. Not anymore. It's a science project with dreams. But you'll cut around the green part and pretend you didn't notice the movement. In medieval times, the rule is simple. If it doesn't kill you on sight, it's fair game. You learned this young. Around the same time, you learned that those white worms in the flour weren't extra protein. They were the flour. And no one has time to sift. You make peace with your ingredients, not out of love, out of fear. You head to the communal fire pit, where someone's already heating up something in a cauldron that might once have been soup but now looks like punishment. The pot is blackened, crusted, and older than your father's bad knee. No one ever really cleans this. They just add more ingredients to what's left from last night and let the new stew fight it out in there. This is called pottage. And it's your future and your past, and probably your present if you can stomach it. It's a goopy, boiling slop of beans, oats, roots, and guilt. Always simmering, never clean. New food goes in. Old food never leaves. It's like a terrible soup orgy that never ends. Sometimes, for flavour, someone throws in a dried apple, or a turnip, or the bone of something that may or may not still be haunting the barn. You kneel beside the pot and ladle out a blob. It's hot. That's the only good thing about it. The rest is texture. Slippery, fibrous, chewy, crunchy, sour, and somehow dry, all at once. You chew, you question everything, you chew again. It tastes like a foot. It tastes like betrayal. It tastes familiar. You eat because it's food. You don't stop to savour. You don't ask what's in it. You never ask what's in it, because sometimes it's pigeon, sometimes it's a squirrel, sometimes it's the neighbour's cat, and you all agreed never to speak of that night again. This is your normal, your identity. Not a cook, not a customer, a compromiser, a willing participant in a daily game of will this kill me? You don't have a spice rack. You have salt, if you're lucky, stored in a little cloth pouch and guarded like treasure. Most of the time, the flavour comes from smoke, char, and shame. And if you live near the sea, you might get dried herring. Herring that's been salted, sun-dried, stored in barrels, pissed on by goats, unintentionally you think, and left to rehydrate in your pot of misery. It's crunchy in all the wrong places and smells like it holds grudges. And this isn't just you. This is everyone you know. Every peasant, every child, every elderly grandmother with no teeth and 1,000-yard stare. You don't bond over meals. You survive them together. You chew in silence, gag in chorus, and occasionally pray that the weird lump in your spoon isn't meat from last week's funeral pig. There's no shame in hunger, only in hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, today's stew won't have feathers in it. Spoiler, it always has feathers. Outside, a neighbour is gutting a hare. He's saving the organs for a pudding. Not a sweet, creamy dessert. No, blood pudding. A sausage of clotted animal blood, barley and herbs. It's dark, dense, slightly jiggly. It smells like rust and guilt. You've eaten it before, you'll eat it again. Because when meat is rare and money is fantasy, blood becomes seasoning. Every part of the animal is used. Eyeballs, intestines, cartilage, nothing goes to waste. Not because you're respectful, because you're desperate. Food in your world is not art. It is a dare. A survival challenge wrapped in bark-flavoured bread. And speaking of bread, don't get too excited. Your daily bread is literally that. One loaf. Flat, dry, possibly spiked with sand if the local millstone was acting up. You don't cut this bread, you attack it. With your teeth, your fingers, your willpower. And sometimes it fights back. You sit by the hearth, chewing on what used to be a leek, now reduced to stringy bitterness and the taste of old rainwater. Your jaw hurts, your stomach growls in betrayal, and your brain keeps asking the same question. Was that a pebble or just really aggressive barley? And yet, somehow, this is food. Because in your world, taste isn't the goal. Survival is. You don't cook for pleasure. You cook to make things less immediately horrifying. Your palate? Shattered? Your dignity? Long since digested? Your identity? You're now a walking compost bin with teeth. And worse, the law agrees. Because everything you do, every root you pull, every mushroom you sniff, every rabbit you chase through the hedgerow might be illegal. Food isn't just hard to find. It's restricted, regulated, and very possibly punishable by death. Let's say you're lucky, by medieval standards, and you spot a fat deer in the woods. You notch your little handmade arrow, take a deep breath, and congratulations, you've just committed a felony. That deer belongs to the Lord. The woods, also the Lord's. The air the deer was breathing, technically taxable. Poaching is not just frowned upon. It's a hanging offence. You're not just stealing meat. You're challenging a rigid social structure built on the idea that only rich people are allowed to eat like predators. So instead, you go after squirrels, rats, hedgehogs, frogs. Yes, frogs. Slimy, boiled, occasionally grilled, and always suspiciously chewy. You eat them because they're not owned by anyone. Yet, give the church time. Your children, assuming they made it past their 3rd birthday, are also foragers now. They know where the nettles grow soft, how to dig up edible roots without dying, and which mushrooms only kill you a little bit. Sometimes they bring back eggs from wild birds. Sometimes they bring back things. Once, your youngest handed you something and said, "This smells like soup." It was a dead vole. It did not smell like soup. You cooked it anyway. In town, you might be lucky enough to see a market day. Imagine rows of stalls sagging under the weight of stale loaves, dried fish, suspicious pies, and vegetables so shriveled they look like cursed relics. You want to buy something, but what's money? You're a peasant. You trade. 1 sack of firewood for a half wheel of questionable cheese. 3 hours of ditch digging for a jar of goose fat that smells like war crimes. And if you can't pay, you beg, quietly, politely, while pretending not to look at the dog carcass roasting over someone's makeshift grill. And still, in the background of all this desperation, the upper class is feasting. Not well, but spectacularly. They dine on meat stuffed into meats, geese inside pigs, pigeons in pies, entire roasted boars dressed like royalty and glazed in wine-soaked breadcrumbs. But don't be jealous, because the food up there, it's just as disgusting, just more expensive. That boar has been hanging for weeks, covered in mould, tenderized by time, and flavoured with spices shipped across continents and handled by 14 different plague vectors. It's not safer, just spicier. You chew the same bones. They just sprinkle theirs with cinnamon and spices. Spices are currency. Pepper is worth more than you. Nutmeg could buy you a house, if houses came with floors. Cloves? Exotic and terrifying. You don't use spices. You use salt, if you're lucky, or just pretend the food is supposed to taste like that. You flavour things with fire, hunger, and delusion. And that's who you are now. You are not a gourmet. You are not even a cook. You are a participant in a centuries-long performance art piece called What Happens If We Boil This? Your tools are primitive. Your ingredients questionable. Your recipes passed down through generations of suffering. And yet, somehow, you survive. Chewing leather, sipping broth made from bones that were already chewed once, and finding meaning in the crust at the bottom of the pot. Because if you don't, you die. Your entire identity is now wrapped in rot and ritual. You measure your worth in turnips. You dream of bread that doesn't chip a tooth. You pray for rain, not just for the crops, but to wash the bugs out of your stew. And the worst part? This isn't the low point. It's just breakfast. The place you call a kitchen is not a kitchen. It's a crime scene waiting to happen. There's no sink, no counters, no cabinets, no kitchen island, unless you count that flat rock someone uses to club roots into submission. What you have is a smoky corner in your one-room hovel where things are boiled until they stop being a liability. The hearth is where everything happens. Cooking, heating, occasional animal births, and once a small fire that took Uncle Wulfric's eyebrows. The pot that hangs over it is blackened, crusted, and older than your local priest. No one knows what it's made of anymore. Possibly regret. Ashes dust every surface. Fat drips from the beams. And something inside that corner basket is breathing. You don't ask questions. You just cook around it. Let's talk surfaces. You don't have a table. You have a plank of warped wood supported by two uneven rocks. Cutting boards? You're lucky to have a clean spot on the floor. Every meal starts by kneeling in the dirt, sorting ingredients on a piece of leather that used to be a shoe, or possibly still is. Knives are rare. Sharp knives, rarer still. Your blade is chipped, rusted, and probably cursed. You sharpen it with a rock and your feelings. Half your cooking prep time is spent trying not to sever a finger. The other half is realising you just did. There's no soap, no hot water, no sponge. You clean dishes by wiping them with straw and screaming at the bacteria. Your food prep station is surrounded by livestock, not because it's charming, but because you literally share your house with them. The chickens live in the corner. The goat sleeps under the table. The pig, technically your future dinner, currently acts as your heating system. They are not house-trained. They do not respect boundaries. The goat has licked your spoon twice. You could try shooing them away, but they're bolder than you are. This is their home now, and you are a guest in the dining room of a very judgmental pig. Outside it gets worse. Your pantry is a hole in the ground with a lid. Sometimes it's called a root cellar. Sometimes it's called where the mould goes to breed. Everything down there is damp, lumpy, and smells like someone buried shame and forgot about it. Vegetables are stored in straw to keep them fresh. They are not fresh. They are just slightly less mouldy than the floor. You find a carrot that's more sponge than root, a turnip with legs, a cabbage that sighs when you pick it up, like even it knows this is beneath both of you. And preservation? Let's talk about that. In your world, there is no refrigeration. There is no vacuum sealing. There is only salt, smoke, and pure stubborn denial. Meat is salted until it tastes like regret, and then hung until it resembles a punishment. Vegetables are pickled in jars so crusty you'd need divine intervention to open them. Sometimes you bury food, not to store it, just to pretend it didn't exist. Your house has no ventilation, which means every cooking session becomes a smoke ritual that chokes the walls, coats your lungs, and leaves your clothes smelling like burnt onions and goat breath. Your eyes sting, your throat scratches, but you keep cooking because starvation is the alternative. You crouch near the fire, stirring your pot with a wooden stick that's been passed down for generations. It's blackened, brittle, and suspiciously sticky. You don't know why. You don't want to know why. And then there are the insects. Flies, gnats, fleas, all of them part of your kitchen brigade. You wave them away half-heartedly, knowing they'll land on your dinner anyway. Sometimes they land in it. You still eat it. You once swatted a fly and 5 more rose from the pottage like steam. You said a prayer. You added more onions. You moved on. This is your environment. Not designed for comfort. Barely designed for survival. Your existence here is simple. Cook fast. Eat faster. And if something starts to smell sweet, run. That's not sugar. That's decomposition. You eat with your fingers. You share your bowl with your brother. You drink from a cup that's also used to scoop animal feed. You don't complain. You just chew and hope your immune system is feeling brave today. You crouch over the pot, staring into the thick surface of what you hope is stew, but might actually be soup's disappointed cousin. Bubbles rise. Not the good kind. Not the boiling kind. The kind that suggest fermentation or haunting. Steam wafts upward and hits your nose with a scent that's somewhere between boiled socks and whatever lies behind a cheese wheel's final warning label. Still you eat, because that's what you do here. Food isn't fresh. Food isn't clean. Food is an ongoing negotiation between your stomach and your sense of self-preservation. Bread? It's not bread. Not anymore. It evolved. The outside is hard enough to deflect arrows. The inside has developed its own microclimate. You break it open and watch a small cloud of flour, dust, and possibly spores rise like a biblical curse. The loaf is streaked with green. You pretend it's herbs. You bite. It's dry. Then suddenly not. And then dry again. It squeaks against your teeth. That's not normal. Nothing is. You've stopped asking questions. You pick up a wedge of cheese from the shelf. It's sweating. That's the first red flag. The second is that it's moving. Just a little. Just enough to let you know it's alive in a way food shouldn't be. It smells like something that once saw the inside of a boot and never recovered. And here's the twist. You still eat it, not all at once. You carve off the least fuzzy edge, scrape it on some bark bread, and swallow with your eyes closed and your soul temporarily disengaged. It hits your gut like betrayal, but at least you're not hungry. Just deeply ashamed. The fruit you find in the bottom of the basket is a pear. Technically, it has the shape of a pear, the colour of sadness, and the texture of wet leather. You press your thumb into it. The skin collapses like bad paper. Juice leaks out. It's brown. You sniff it. The smell burns a little, like it's been aged in a barrel of regret and old vinegar. You take a bite anyway. The rot is strong, but so is your hunger. It's not sweet, it's furious. Your mouth goes numb. You decide that's fine. You spot a dried fish on a hook by the door. It's thin, stiff, and shiny with salt. It looks like it's been used as a weapon. Possibly still is. You chew a piece. It cracks. Your tooth doesn't. Victory. The taste is concentrated ocean, metal, and whatever was living in the barrel with it. You swallow quickly. You wash it down with ale, not because you're thirsty, but because it's the only fluid available that won't immediately betray you. Water is a gamble. Ale is gross, but survivable. Nearby, a neighbour is seasoning her stew. With what, you ask? Charcoal. Ash from the hearth. Not for flavour, for colour. If it looks darker, you believe it's richer. If you believe it's richer, you might not notice that the meat in it is 3 days past suspicious and halfway to penance. Outside, the food markets buzz. Not with people, with flies. Stalls sag under bundles of limp greens, cracked eggs, and strings of sausages that might be intestines, but no one's willing to check. You don't buy much, you can't afford much, but you browse, pretending. A man offers you a pie. It smells like pork. It might be cat. You nod politely and walk away. Food poisoning isn't a freak accident here. It's a season. Everyone gets it. Some people live through it. Some people don't. You've had it. You remember. The cold sweat, the stomach cramps, the prayers whispered into your straw mattress, hoping to wake up and not have your soul exit through your toenails. The worst part? You were grateful for it, because it meant you actually ate. At night, you dream of butter. Real butter. Not the lump of curdled dairy that smells like a dare and separates into solids and other within seconds of room temperature. You think about jam. You've heard rumours. Fruit, sugar, cooked down into sweetness. You don't believe it. Sounds like witchcraft. Even the insects have opinions. Beetles in the flour, mites in the cheese, weevils in the bread. You learn to ignore them. You eat around them. Sometimes you eat them. It's protein. It's fate. It's you now. Still hungry? Probably not. But you're learning the truth. Medieval food wasn't disgusting because people loved suffering. It was disgusting because it had to be. Because preservation meant guesswork. Because storage meant hiding things from rats and forgetting where. Because seasoning meant hoping the smoke masked the smell of spoilage. Because options were limited and time was cruel. You adapted. You didn't thrive. You endured. The space where you cook isn't just inconvenient. It's sacred. Cursed. A social battlefield with walls made of damp wood and judgment. You're not alone in here. Not really. Because food isn't just about hunger. It's about your soul. Your status. Your ability to follow rules set by people who haven't cooked for themselves since their wet nurse retired. There are no cookbooks. There are commandments. And they change depending on who's watching. The church has opinions about what goes in your mouth. You eat fish on Fridays. Not because you love fish. You absolutely do not love fish. But because God said no meat, and someone decided eels don't count. Which means you now boil slippery, boneless sea worms and call it dinner. You stare into the bowl and wonder if salvation should taste like pond water and existential despair. On fast days, which are half the calendar, you can't eat eggs, dairy, or anything joyful. You pretend turnips are exciting. You whisper apologies to your stomach. You chew cold barley and contemplate sin. It's not just survival, it's penance. Feast days? Don't get excited, you still don't get the good stuff. The nobility might have roasted swan, peacock with its feathers sewn back on, gilded with edible gold leaf, because apparently tasting terrible isn't enough. It has to be performative. Meanwhile, you get the leftover giblets. Or a hoof, if they're generous. You chew cartilage and say thank you. Your kitchen doesn't have shelves. It has hierarchy. Where your food is stored, or hidden, depends on its value. Salt, if you have it, is kept in a small box with a lid and guarded like a relic. Butter is wrapped in linen and buried in the coldest part of the floor. Meat, precious, rare, nearly mythical, is smoked, dried, or salted beyond recognition. Sometimes the dog gets to it first. Sometimes the dog is dinner. You don't throw food away, ever. Not even when it smells like feet soaked in vinegar. You scrape the mould off. You trim the black edges. You reboil it until it stops screaming. That's your preservation technique, thermal negotiation. You have a wooden bowl. 1. It's stained with stew, grease, and time. You wipe it with straw after every use, or just lick it clean and pretend that counts. Your spoon is carved from a branch you found during a walk that technically wasn't trespassing, but the local baron might disagree. Plates are rare. Forks are fantasy. You eat communally, from the pot, from your hands, from whatever flat surface isn't currently on fire. Cleanliness is subjective. If it doesn't crunch unexpectedly, it's clean. And your body, it's a map of food betrayal. Your gums are soft. Your teeth are loose. Bread wears them down like gravel. You've bitten into something hard more times than you've prayed, and that's saying something. Every chew is a risk. Every swallow, a gamble. You've eaten feathers, twigs, hair, bone shards. You once crunched a beetle and decided it was just extra flavour. You told yourself that. You lied. The animals know what's happening. They smell the cooking. They see the bones. The pig eyes you as you stir. It knows. The chicken doesn't make eye contact anymore. It understands the cycle. You raise them. You feed them. Then one day you eat them. Not because you want to, because you need to. And because your neighbour just had twins. And that means one less mouth in the house next door. Which means there's a leftover chicken. This is your kitchen. This is your existence. You cook in the same space you sleep, cough, argue, and mourn. You stir with tools that have never known soap. You swallow what your ancestors called food, and what modern biologists might call biohazards. You store your hopes in clay pots, and pray they don't explode from internal fermentation. Every meal is a ritual, not a celebration. A desperate, smoke-choked, ash-smeared ritual to keep death slightly more inconvenient than digestion. You are your kitchen, and your kitchen is trying to kill you. Hunger is not a temporary feeling in your world, it's a permanent state, a background hum in your bones. And the only way to quiet it, even slightly, is with labour, not effort. Suffering. You don't hunt for flavour. You don't forage for fun. You don't cook to experiment. You work to eat. And even then, you're not guaranteed anything but a scraped out pot and a vague sense of impending dental trauma. You want dinner? Get outside. It's time to suffer for your supper. Your day begins with a sigh and a blister. You wake up already exhausted, because yesterday you spent 12 hours in a field trying to convince rocks to become soil and weeds to become food. Your hands are cracked. Your back is tight. Your feet? They've seen better centuries. There is no breakfast, just the memory of it. Maybe a heel of bread. Maybe the last of the watery pottage, scraped from the bottom like disappointment stew. But if you want more, you have to go find it. Grow it. Scavenge it. Bleed for it. You step into the fields, and the land greets you with frost, mud, and the distant groan of something dying. Possibly your will to live. The soil is hard, ungrateful, and possessed by every bug that bites. You dig with tools that look like they were invented by accident. A wooden spade, a bent iron hook, your bare hands. You plant root vegetables because they don't complain when the rain forgets to fall. You harvest them when they're barely ripe, because waiting risks theft, rot, or the Lord Steward deciding he wants a tax sample. You weed, you water, you hoe. You beg the sky for mercy. You beg the soil to give you one edible thing that won't kill your children, or remind your spouse of the time someone cooked a dead hedgehog and called it spiced meatball. Sometimes it's barley, sometimes it's oats, sometimes it's nothing, and when it's nothing, you boil nothing. You tell your kids it's soup. You let them believe it. And this is just for plant food. Protein, that's a whole other class of torment. Catching meat in your world is like chasing God, elusive, exhausting, and likely to get you punished. You don't have traps. You have a club and a prayer. You chase rabbits like you're the predator, but really you're just another desperate mammal on a tight timeline. You miss. You trip. You cry a little. Then you find a frog and decide maybe you're French now. Fishing is marginally better if you live near water. If you don't, too bad. And even if you do, the river's full of sewage, plague runoff, and whatever Geoffrey the Tanner dumped out behind his shed last night. You cast your line. You catch a boot. You pretend it's eel. You bring it home anyway. Some days you don't even bother. You forage. Mushrooms. The kind that might feed you, or might kill your entire family in slow, poetic agony. Berries. If they're not bitter, birds got to them first. Roots. Gnarly, bitter, and covered in memories of disappointment. You dig through the underbrush like a guilt-ridden raccoon, praying no one catches you on Lord Reinhardt's land, because stealing nettles is apparently a crime now. You risk punishment for soup garnish. And when you do find something, a few eggs, a skinny chicken, a half-rotten apple, you don't get to keep it. Your lord gets a share, your church gets a tithe, your neighbour gets suspicious, and your stomach gets whatever's left. Feasting is fiction, eating is paperwork. You might also process food. That's what they call it when you gut a pig, bleed a goose, or skin a rabbit with the same knife you used to whittle your spoon. It's messy. It's cold. It's emotional damage with a meat aftertaste. Blood goes into sausage, bones into broth, skin into everything, because if you don't use all of it, someone will scold you, rob you, or accuse you of witchcraft. You cry, you wipe your tears on your tunic, then you accidentally use the same hand to season the liver. It happens. You ferment, you dry, you pickle. All words that sound charming today, but back then just meant, try not to die next winter. You throw cabbage in a barrel, wait a month, and hope it doesn't turn into a biohazard. Sometimes it ferments beautifully. Sometimes it bites back. Either way you eat it. Because you're not living. You're outlasting. You've worked all morning. You're sweating. You're shaking. You've pulled weeds, hauled water, nearly stepped on a snake that turned out to be a stick, and screamed loud enough to wake your ancestors. And here comes the best part. None of this is for you. The land doesn't belong to you. The harvest doesn't belong to you. That plump carrot you just yanked from the earth? The Lord's. Everything you do feeds someone higher up. Someone cleaner. Someone who thinks salt pork is peasant food and has never tasted boiled nettle in their life. You labour because you have to. Because your family depends on it. Because your salary is not starving to death this week. And because your lord's dogs eat better than you do. There's a hierarchy, and it starts with your back and ends with his banquet table. You till his fields. You pay him in chickens. You watch him spit out the pheasant roast because it's slightly overcooked while you chew on a bone that may or may not have belonged to a former pet. He complains about his wine. You drink beer so watered down it feels like betrayal with bubbles. He calls it a fast when the kitchen runs out of swan. You call it a fast when there's nothing left but the broth you already drank yesterday. You know what the nobility does with their food? They decorate it. They take bad meat and cover it in gold leaf. They stuff songbirds inside pigs, inside pies. They build towers out of candied dates and yell at their cooks if the sugar crust isn't shiny enough. Meanwhile, you're boiling barley and calling it a feast because someone dropped half a sausage in by accident. Their leftovers could feed your village. Instead they toss them to the dogs. Or worse, into the moat. Which makes you wonder, is the moat edible now? You've considered it, and you? You work not just to feed yourself, but everyone else around you. Your children. Small, wide-eyed, constantly sticky. They help by digging, picking berries, losing berries, eating berries, bringing back a mushroom that glows in the dark, and insisting it's definitely fine. Your spouse, grinding grain, tending fire, scraping porridge from the inside of the cauldron like it owes them money. You're a team. A tired, hungry team being slowly undone by a winter turnip. Even your animals expect to be fed. The goat screams if you're late. The chickens judge you. The pig watches, always. There's no day off. No, I'm not feeling it today. No, I'll grab something on the way. The only on the way here is starvation. You get sick. You still work. You break a finger. Wrap it in moss and keep stirring. You fall into a ditch. Hope you land near something edible. The world doesn't pause because your knees gave out. It just eats without you. And the worst part? You're still expected to be grateful. For the land. For the scraps. For the honour of boiling parsnips in someone else's old sheep grease. The priest says hunger is holy. The Lord says hunger is character building. The market says hunger is expensive. You say nothing because your mouth is full of bark bread and shame. Sometimes you get paid in food, not coins, not fabric, just food. 3 eggs and a strip of fat for a week's work. A mouldy cheese wheel for hauling wood through a blizzard. A half-dead chicken for cleaning the communal latrine. And still, you smile, you nod, you chew the cheese. You name the chicken Hope. You cook it that night. Every calorie is a battle. You walk 10 miles for berries. You dig all day for potatoes. You barter for gruel. You bleed for soup. And then you eat it standing up, leaning against a wall, trying not to fall asleep between bites. You don't savour anything. You survive everything. But once in a while, just once, something miraculous happens. You catch a rabbit. A real, honest rabbit. Not a rat with a PR team. You bring it home like treasure. Your children dance. Your spouse cries. And the pot is scrubbed. The fire is stoked. Herbs are stolen from the neighbour's fence. That night, you eat meat. And for 5 minutes, you remember what it feels like to be alive, before your stomach starts questioning whether that rabbit was a little too easy to catch. Spoiler, it was, and you'll pay for it tomorrow. You worked, you scraped, you begged the earth for something edible, and still, it wasn't enough. The barley failed, the goat wandered off, the tax collector came early, and now your last sack of onions is part of Lord Reinhardt's decorative stew pyramid. So now you're really hungry. The kind of hungry that makes your ears ring. The kind of hungry that makes tree bark look promising. kind of hungry that turns your body into a bargaining chip and your dignity into soup seasoning. This is when the menu changes. You stop eating food, you start eating things. Grass? Yes. Boiled roots that taste like dirt wrapped in bitterness? Sure. Clay? Some folks try it. Doesn't help. Gives you something new to complain about while your insides turn into a medieval art installation. You find a nest of bird eggs. They're warm. One of them chirps. You eat them anyway. You don't feel good about it. You just feel full. For once. The famine years hit hardest. You remember them like old scars. The winter when everyone was boiling shoe leather. The spring when someone made rat stew and no one asked how it was seasoned. The summer when people started quietly vanishing and no one looked too hard. You still remember chewing on dried moss soaked in broth. It tasted like the forest gave up on you. You still remember the day your uncle baked a loaf of bread mixed with ground up bones. He said it gave it structure. He was right. It was nearly indestructible. You also remember chewing for 5 straight minutes and crying without blinking. You've eaten plague bread, the kind bulked up with rye, contaminated by ergot, a fungus that makes you hallucinate, convulse, and possibly start seeing saints in your porridge. You didn't know what was happening. You just thought the bread was angry. You've eaten spoiled milk cheese that fizzled on your tongue and burned your throat. You've eaten stew made from offal, the polite term for intestines, kidneys, and whatever else was inside the animal when it died and wasn't cleaned out in time. You've eaten salted fish that had more salt than fish and more bones than anyone admitted. And worst of all, you've eaten nothing. The kind of meal that echoes, the kind of meal that teaches you what your stomach sounds like when it starts consuming your own regrets. Neighbours get quiet during these times. You stop sharing. You stop smiling. You start watching each other like crows waiting for the fall. Someone digs up old turnips. Someone else starts boiling nettles. Someone else goes missing. And a week later, someone's pottage smells different. You hope it's just squirrel. You pray it's just squirrel. Some say famine brings communities together. Not here. Not in this village. Not when everyone's stomach is louder than their conscience. You've seen people sell their own clothing for a bag of oats. You've seen mothers feed their children and go to bed shaking. You've seen what happens when hunger becomes religion. And food. It becomes the god you worship and the devil you fear. You learn to ration crumbs, to cut mould off bread and call it the soft part, to dilute soup until it's a suggestion. You water it down, then down again. Eventually, you're drinking broth made from broth made from broth. It's hot. It's brown. It's technically food. You call it nutritional hope. And yet, you keep working. Because that's all you can do. You work for the chance to eat something that doesn't bite back. You work for the scraps. You work because the alternative is worse. You learn which mushrooms kill fast. Which ones just make you weep and poop sideways. You learn that hunger isn't a hole. It's a staircase down. And the lower you go, the more it asks of you. Your pride, your strength, your name. But somehow, you're still here. Still chewing. Still scraping. Still bargaining with the landscape like a desperate gambler with one turnip in a dream. You dig. You stir. You swallow. Because the worst food in the world is still better than no food at all. And your body? Still trying. still asking, still hoping. In the medieval world, your meals don't just feed you, they label you, like a peasant tag written in stale gravy. What's on your plate is not just food. It's a declaration. I am poor. I am expendable. I have never tasted butter that didn't come with a side of guilt. Because here, food isn't just about hunger. It's about power. And if your stew smells weak, people know where you stand. Take bread, for example. Seems simple, right? Wrong. Bread is status. The rich eat white bread. Fine, soft, sifted so clean it practically glows. It's made from wheat so refined it might as well be powdered dignity. You? You eat rye, barley, millet if you're lucky, sawdust if you're not. Your loaf is heavy, dark, rough. You don't bite into it. You chip at it like a sculptor, removing sin from a boulder. You chew until your jaw begs for peace, and your gums bleed prayers. Up the hill in the manor, the nobles are having a feast. Roasted meats, sweet fruits preserved in honey, tart spiced with cinnamon brought from a place no one can pronounce, but everyone wants to brag about. Down here, you just boiled your only onion in ditch water and called it soup. They have servants, spices, napkins made of linen. You have a crust of bread and your own sleeve. And you're not even allowed to eat your bread on the Lord's land unless you pay for the privilege of starving there. It's called a bake tax. Yes, they charge you for baking your own flour in someone else's oven. And if you can't pay, no bread for you. You get to gnaw on whatever's left in the grain sack after the rats have had their rave. And the insults don't stop at flour. Ever heard of a trencher? It's a slab of old bread used as a plate by the upper class. They pile their feast on it, soak it with gravy and meat drippings, then throw it away. Sometimes they give it to the poor, sometimes to dogs, sometimes to the fire. You'd eat it off the floor, and they know it. But you don't get invited. You stand outside, hungry, hoping to catch a waft of roasted something before it's tossed into a moat like it failed to impress. Even meat has a caste system. Beef, that's noble. Venison, royalty. Goose, clergy. Pig's ear, that's more your style. You eat the parts no one wants. The parts with cartilage, bone, the smell of disappointment cooked into every fibre. The tongue, the feet, the kidney, served grey and rubbery with a side of boiled judgment. And when a noble shares food with you, it's not kindness, it's display. They toss bones to peasants the way you'd feed a dog. It is performative generosity. See how generous I am, giving the poor this mutton bone with some meat still clinging to it. You thank them. You bow. You gnaw that bone like it's the last joy on earth. Because it kind of is. And woe to you if you eat something you shouldn't. Poaching isn't just theft. It's a direct challenge to the system. You catch a deer in the woods? That's treason. That rabbit, Lord's property. That pigeon, technically sky royalty. Caught with unauthorised meat and you're not just beaten, you're made an example. Punishment isn't a quiet slap on the wrist. It's public, painful, possibly permanent. Stocks, whipping, branding, or just disappearing. But it's not just the lords who judge you. Everyone does. Your neighbour sees what you eat. They know if your stew smells too rich. They notice if your bread looks too white. They remember if you're using herbs that don't grow nearby. How did you afford that pepper? Why is your cheese not grey? Didn't your husband just die? Why are you eating pie? questions get asked, accusations whispered. If you eat above your station, you must be doing something wrong. And in medieval Europe, wrong has a price. Even your cookware tattles on you. Clay pots are for commoners. Metal cauldrons mean you have connections, or you stole it. Wooden spoons? Everyone has them. Except nobles. They have silver. They don't stir their food, they command it. Food isn't nourishment here, it's a mirror. And yours is cracked, stained with beet broth, and smells faintly of mildew. What you eat exposes you. To judgment, to gossip, to punishment. Your hunger might be private, but your plate is public. Up in the castle, that big, drafty limestone nightmare on the hill, dinner isn't dinner. It's theatre. A noble doesn't just eat. They perform the act of eating for an audience of servants, sycophants, and terrified kitchen boys, hoping not to be screamed at for over-roasting the peacock's third layer of decorative fennel stuffing. Picture it. The Lord is seated at the centre of a grand hall, under banners depicting lions, dragons, or other creatures he's never met. His plate is gold. His wine is imported. The roast on the table is a boar so large it might have had its own social calendar. But it's not about the meat. It's about the message, the size, the extravagance, the waste. Because waste is power. The more they throw away, the more you understand. This is how much I have. I can afford to let it rot. Feasts are designed to humiliate you by proximity. The music, the laughter, the clanging of goblets as people toast to excess, while you chew the same barley crust you soaked in ale 3 times to make it swallowable. Even if you're allowed to watch. From the walls, from the servant's bench, from the dog's corner, you don't eat, you observe. And when you do eat, it's what they've already chewed with their eyes and discarded with their hands. Sometimes they'll gift you leftovers, not because they care, because they want gratitude. They want you to thank them for a roast bone they found unappealing. You're expected to bow for grease, smile for crumbs. And if you hesitate, if you say nothing, if you forget your place for 1 second, congratulations. You're ungrateful. You're insolent. You're probably a heretic. Enjoy the stocks, the kitchen staff in these castles. They don't get the good stuff either. They prepare it, they carry it, they breathe it in, and then slink off to the back rooms to gnaw on dry bread and reheated soup from last week's banquet. There's no justice in food, only proximity. You can stand near power. You can smell its roast duck. But unless you are power, you'll never taste it hot. Food for the rich is loud, bright, garnished like a corpse at an expensive funeral. They dye their dishes, saffron, beetroot, spinach paste, anything to make the colours pop, and say, look what I can afford to waste on aesthetics. Meanwhile, your dinner is one colour, brown, slightly darker brown, slightly wetter brown. You could mix up 5 medieval meals and still not tell them apart by sight or smell. And then there's sugar. Rare. Imported. Expensive enough to get someone stabbed. And what do they do with it? They build sculptures. Yes. They take powdered sugar, form it into castles, swans, flowers, and display it for fun before smashing it or letting it dissolve in the humid medieval air. You don't get sugar. You get dried fruit that's been so stretched it now qualifies as leather. You chew it like guilt. It tastes like debt. What they eat isn't just different. It's protected. The game animals? Protected. The fancier cuts of meat? Locked up. The spices? counted. Their food is guarded like treasure. Yours is technically edible and therefore worthless. Even when you're eating the same species, you're not eating the same thing. They eat chicken breast. You get feet. They eat lamb chops. You get boiled mutton sinew. They eat fish fillets. You get fish head stew, where the eyes stare at you like they know you lost. If you happen to catch something nice, a fat rabbit, a clean bird, and someone sees it, prepare for questions. Where'd you get that? Who gave you permission? Are you poaching again? Doesn't matter if you trapped it on your own. If it looks good, it's probably not yours to begin with. The richer the meal, the more suspicious you become. A hungry peasant with a good stew is dangerous, because it means they might have options. And if you have options, you might start thinking. And if you think, well, now you're a problem. So you hide your good meals. You eat in silence. You pretend your porridge is bad, even when it's okay. You overcook your rabbit so the smell doesn't travel. You bury the bones. You survive the only way a peasant with ambition can, by pretending to fail. You thought you were safe. You thought maybe, just maybe, this one time you'd enjoy your food without consequence. That steaming hunk of barley bread you managed to bake, crusty, round, smelling faintly like triumph and wood smoke. You thought you earned it. And then someone smelled it. The nose is the medieval surveillance system. There are no cameras, no written records, just suspicion and the scent of something better than turnip soup. Your neighbour Agnes, who hasn't smiled since the famine of 36, catches a whiff and immediately knows you're doing too well. She doesn't ask questions. She just starts talking. To the priest, to the reeve, to the weird guy with the glass eye who shows up whenever someone gets accused of theft. It starts as a whisper. Where did they get flour that white? Was that butter I smelled? I heard they had 2 eggs this week. 2! And just like that, your bread becomes a scandal. Because in your world, being hungry is normal. Being full, suspicious. Being satisfied, dangerous. Your neighbours, the ones who used to share garlic, the ones who helped rebuild your roof with twine and curses. Now watch your windows. They don't want your bread. They want justice. The kind that comes when someone too close to comfort gets reminded of their place. The church is no better. You bring a nice offering, a fresh loaf, a small wheel of cheese, and suddenly the priest is curious. Where did this come from? Have you been paying your tithes? Are you fasting properly on Wednesdays? No one's congratulating you. They're just calculating. Because food in this world isn't shared. It's counted. And if you try to be generous, to give away a little of what you have, congratulations. Now you're either showing off or poisoning people. There's no middle ground. You offer a slice of stew pie to your neighbour. They take it, they sniff it. They wait a full day before eating it. In case you're a witch trying to ruin their digestion and their marriage. You meant kindness. They saw strategy. You cannot win. You can only chew quietly and hope no one sees the goose fat glistening on your chin. This is how food becomes humiliation. You're not just poor, you're visibly poor, smelling poor, chewing poor, baking poor. And when you don't look poor, you become a target. Because poverty is communal. And no one likes to stand out. Worse still, when something goes wrong, food becomes the evidence. Your child gets sick after a feast day? Must have eaten too well. Your neighbour's cow dies? Maybe it was that soup you gave them last week. The miller's wife breaks out in hives? Maybe that honeycomb you shared was cursed. Food links everything. And when everything is fragile, food is the first thing blamed. You eat with your head down. You cook with your windows shut. You stash your spices behind a loose floorboard and pray no one asks why your broth smells better than theirs. Because shame travels faster than the plague. And in a village where everyone is hurting, nothing draws fire faster than success, even in spoonfuls. Even your body betrays you. You gain a little weight? Suspicious. You don't look exhausted? Who are you stealing from? You have good teeth? Clearly you've been hoarding apples. You feel healthy for 1 week. Expect someone to accuse you of having made a pact with a woodland demon in exchange for a steady turnip supply. And if you fall? If your luck runs out and you're starving again? The same people who whispered about your good stew will whisper again. See? Told you. That's what happens when you get greedy. No one helps. No one remembers the soup you shared. Only the week your chimney smelled like lamb. Food is not fuel. It's a mirror of class, suspicion, and power. And you're always one bite away from crossing the line between hungry and hunted. You're not allowed to rise. You're barely allowed to eat. In medieval Europe, food isn't just something you eat. It's something you're told how to eat, when, where, why. And most importantly, whether you're allowed to feel good about it. Because behind every bowl of stew and sad hunk of bread, there's an invisible authority figure wagging a finger. And spoiler, it's the church. The church has opinions, strong ones, on everything from how you boil an egg to whether chewing too enthusiastically is a sign of moral weakness. They don't just run your calendar, they run your plate. You live your life by holy days, saints' days, fasting days, feast days, half-fasting days, pretending to be feast days, and vaguely sanctified Tuesdays, where no one's sure if fish is allowed, but everyone's afraid to ask. On paper, there are over 180 fasting days a year. That's half your calendar. Half the time you're technically not supposed to eat meat, which is fine. You weren't eating meat anyway, because you're poor. And also, because the one time you caught a rabbit, it stared at you so long during prep that now you see it in your dreams. So fasting, sure, you call that normal. But even then, you have rules. No meat, no animal fat, no dairy, sometimes no eggs, definitely no fun. Instead you eat fish, which sounds reasonable, until you realise what counts as fish has been creatively interpreted by desperate monks and optimistic butchers. Beavers? Fish, because they swim. Barnacle geese? Also fish, because medieval people thought they literally grew from driftwood. Otters? It was debated. You've eaten things that make no biological sense and told yourself it's for God. You once ate a dried beaver tail boiled in ale. It tasted like repentance. And leather. Mostly leather. And when you're not fasting, you're feasting. Or rather, you're watching someone else feast. Because feast days don't mean you get food. They mean the nobles eat too much, and you get to clean up afterward. They celebrate saints with gilded roasts. You celebrate with broth. And if you ask why, the answer is God loves humility, which is a fun way to say no seconds. Meals aren't just for nourishment, they're for penance. Eat too much? Sin. Eat too quickly? Sin. Think about enjoying your food? Double sin. You're expected to chew with restraint, to swallow with purpose, to thank heaven for your bowl of sadness stew, and say grace like it wasn't mostly rainwater and turnip skins. The church doesn't just shame hunger, it weaponizes it. Gluttony is a deadly sin. Poverty is a holy state. So every time you fantasize about roast goose or soft cheese, you wonder, is this lust for lunch? And if you get sick, clearly you deserved it. A stomachache means you ate something with pride. Bad bread, punishment for envy. Diarrhea, probably a spiritual lesson in humility. You're not digesting food, you're processing guilt. And if you thought medicine would help, think again. Doctors, if you can call them that, are just priests with leeches. They believe digestion is ruled by humours. 4 of them: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. And apparently, that chunk of mystery meat you ate last night is messing with your bile ratio. The prescription, laxatives, vinegar, possibly exorcism. You start to believe the food is cursed. Or maybe you are. Every bean, every sprig of thyme, every bowl of broth has meaning now. And possibly consequences. You once ate a fig on a Sunday and got a splinter that same night. Coincidence? Maybe. But you still whispered an apology to St. Lawrence just in case. Even herbs are suspicious. Rosemary is for memory, sage is for wisdom. Too much parsley. You might attract demons. No one knows why. You just don't. You boil leaves and hope. You make tea out of mint and regret. You pray over broth like it's holy water. Because in your world, every bite is a theological risk. You'd think a bowl of peas wouldn't start a theological debate. You'd be wrong. Because somewhere along the line, someone decided peas were suspicious. Too round, too many, too fertile. People whispered that peas could stir the blood. And stirring the blood was one bad meal away from stirring other urges. In other words, peas were morally risky. So you avoided them on fast days. And maybe also during Lent. And definitely if you were trying not to commit lust with your neighbour's wife just by making eye contact over a soup pot. This was common, not just with peas. Spices were blamed for all kinds of things. Too much cinnamon? You're clearly trying to seduce someone. Nutmeg? Reserved for the upper class? And probably the devil. Pepper? The spicy gateway to sin. You couldn't afford any of these, which meant you were technically holier by default. Congratulations. Your pottage was bland, your soul was intact, and your mouth was too busy chewing boiled oats to have time for temptation. Garlic, on the other hand, was a hero. It kept away illness. It kept away demons. It kept away friends. You chewed a clove before church once and weren't allowed back in for a week. Which was fine. You still got the sermon through the window and didn't have to kneel on the cold floor. Win-win. People had theories. So many theories. Eat beans, get gas. Get gas, attract evil spirits. Solution? Avoid beans. Eat cabbage in the wrong phase of the moon. Prepare for emotional collapse. Bread that doesn't rise properly? Clearly someone in your household is harbouring sin. Or worse, didn't tithe properly. You weren't just feeding yourself. You were navigating a moral minefield in a stew pot. You wanted flavour? You got suspicion. You wanted texture. You got exorcism. You wanted seconds. You got judgment from 3 neighbours, your cousin, and the village priest who now wants to have a word. Fasting wasn't just about not eating meat. It was about eating the right kind of not meat. You couldn't just swap meat for something delicious. That was cheating. No buttery mushrooms. No sweet almond milk. No fish that tasted better than goat. If your fasting food tasted good, you were doing it wrong. And doing it wrong meant you were testing God's patience. And don't even ask about honey. Honey was a luxury, a treat, but also a metaphor. It symbolised purity, love, sweetness of spirit, divine nourishment. So naturally, if you enjoyed it too much, you were probably going to hell. Your life was shaped by food rules you never fully understood. You heard them whispered, preached, enforced, but never questioned. Why? Because everyone believed. And belief was stronger than hunger. Even if the soup was half dirt and the bread had visible bugs, you ate it the way God intended, quietly and with fear. Folklore filled the rest. Your aunt once told you never to stir stew counterclockwise. It brings death, or bad luck, or curdled onions. She wasn't sure, but she never took the chance. You heard that eggs laid on a Friday had the devil's eye in them, that red berries should only be picked on even-numbered days, that if you drop a spoon, it means company is coming. If it's a fork, it means the devil is already here. Spoiler, you don't have a fork. Food wasn't food. It was a ritual, and every meal was a sermon in disguise. You didn't just eat, you confessed. With your hands, with your ingredients, with your ability to chew guilt without seasoning. You once watched your cousin drop a wheel of cheese. It cracked. It oozed. It hissed. He swore it moved. The village priest was called. He declared it unclean. The cheese was buried in the woods. 3 people fasted for a week. No one talks about it now, but everyone remembers. Because in your world, food isn't just food. It's superstition, sin, and spiritual warfare, all served lukewarm. You don't question the rules. You follow them, or at least pretend to. You don't want to be the person who gets labelled as inviting darkness, because your bread rose too high. Prideful bread leads to prideful thoughts. Prideful thoughts lead to dancing. Dancing leads to witchcraft. This is how logic works here. You once knew a woman who baked cakes shaped like flowers. She was kind, shared recipes, had a garden. Then someone saw her talking to a black bird. She was accused of putting charms in the butter. She was tried. She was gone by winter. Now you keep your bread ugly and your thoughts quiet. Monks wrote recipe books, full of medical foods and blessed broths. They were supposed to heal, supposed to cleanse. Most of them tasted like sadness mixed with sage and despair. But you ate them because they were holy. If it came from a monk's spoon, it couldn't be bad. Even if it made you sick for 3 days and gave you visions of a saint scolding you in Latin. Then there were the miracle foods. That one time, Brother Edric lived off dried apples for 40 days and claimed it purified his soul. That one nun who subsisted on barley and silence and said she could hear angels in the oven. That one child who ate nothing but honeycomb and was declared touched by God. You? You once had soup 2 days in a row and felt moderately hopeful. No one canonized you. Fasting was its own performance. People didn't just refrain from food, they announced it, loudly, piously, with a face like martyrdom and a stomach like a haunted cave. You tried to fast once, properly, no meat, no dairy. You still had to work 14 hours, carry firewood, and try not to collapse while grinding rye that smelled like mould and foot. By day 3, you were seeing stars. By day 5, you were trying to lick flavour off a spoon that had only touched boiled moss. By day 6, you considered chewing bark. By day 7, the priest commended your spiritual strength and handed you a slice of fish pie that was 90% crust and 10% holy disappointment. But here's the irony. The church tells you that gluttony is a sin, but when the nobles feast, when the bishops consume entire roasted oxen with fig glaze and 6 courses of imported nonsense, that's celebration. That's divine abundance. When you chew too fast on a hunk of cheese rind, that's moral decay. You go to confession and admit that you enjoyed your soup too much. You whisper that you found pleasure in a plum. You cry because your meal reminded you of better times, and that joy made you feel guilty. You're told to fast, to pray, to eat less next time. To consider your cravings a test of faith. You nod. You go home. You boil cabbage in silence. At this point, you start to wonder, is it possible to eat without shame? Is there such a thing as a holy stew? A sacred loaf? A broth that doesn't carry generational trauma? You're not sure. You just know your teeth hurt. Your stomach growls. And tomorrow is another feast day you can't afford. You kiss the crucifix. You bless the mouldy bread. You bow before the stew and hope the meat in it died of natural causes. You chew slowly, solemnly, gratefully, because maybe, just maybe, the angels are watching, and they like humility. You've eaten bad bread. You've sipped pottage with suspicious bubbles. You've chewed meat that smelled like morning. And still, you haven't hit bottom yet. Because now we arrive at the real horrors, the foods that should have been outlawed, not because they were unsafe, but because they were unforgivable. Let's start with blood. Not metaphorical blood. Not essence of animal. Actual warm congealed blood, collected in a bowl while a pig squeals its final regrets, stirred so it doesn't clot, and boiled into something called black pudding. It's sausage, technically, stuffed with barley, fat, and nightmares. You eat it on feast days. You eat it on fast days, if you can pretend it's fish. You eat it because it's nutritious. You eat it because it's there. You try not to think about the iron tang that makes your gums feel like they're rusting. Then there's jellied meat. Yes, jellied. Take leftover pork, beef, or bird bits. Boil the bones until the marrow sobs. Cool the liquid. Let it gel into a grey, wobbly mass that stares back at you like a guilty conscience. They call it aspic. You call it why. Sometimes they decorate it with peas, or egg slices, or other ingredients that also don't belong in a meat-based dessert. You slice into it. It jiggles. You chew. It squeaks. You cry. Quietly. Now imagine this. A pie. Sounds fine, right? Pie is comforting. Familiar. Trustworthy until it starts to twitch. Because this is surprise pie. The surprise? It's alive. In medieval feasts, nobles would sometimes bake pies with live birds inside. Blackbirds. Doves. A flock of something terrified. When the crust is cut, the birds escape, flapping into the dining hall in a flurry of feathers and trauma. It's a spectacle. It's a joke. It's also a dinner you now can't eat because it flew away. Want dessert? Too bad. Here's a hard egg that's been buried underground for months. It's black. It smells like ammonia. It tastes like betrayal. They say it's preserved. You say it's revenge from the chicken. Once you tried boiled cow stomach. It had the texture of a leather boot and the flavour of a barnyard confession. You chewed for 15 minutes and still couldn't swallow it emotionally. You asked the cook what it was. They said tripe. You nodded. You added salt. You kept going. Because saying no to tripe means saying yes to hunger. You've had fermented fish paste that made your eyes water. It came in a clay pot, sealed with wax, open with fear. You spread it on bread. The bread crumbled. Your spirit followed. They say it's good for you. You don't believe them. You think it's punishment for enjoying that apple last week. Ever had lamprey? It's a fish, sort of. Mostly teeth. Looks like something that should live in a cave and guard cursed treasure. You cook it in its own blood and call it soup. It glares at you the whole time. You ate it once at a noble feast. It stared. You stared. You both lost. And then the head cheese. Not cheese. Not joy. Boil a pig's head. Strip the meat. Set it in jelly made from its own bones. Cool it. Slice it. Smile politely. This is what the butcher gives you when he's run out of shame. Every food you've mentioned in prayer has now betrayed you. Every dish you once enjoyed as a child has come back in its final form. Jellied, pickled, or fermented into spiritual warfare. You eat them all. Because the worst part of horror food isn't the flavour. It's the necessity. There's a moment, somewhere between your third bowl of boned soup and your second helping of head meat, when you stop seeing food as food and start seeing it as a test of your own loyalty to survival. Because once you run out of normal ingredients, you start working your way through the animal alphabet of regret. First up, eyeballs. You never intended to eat one, but there it was, staring up at you from a stew, bobbing like it had thoughts. You paused. It didn't blink. You bit. It burst. There's no coming back from that texture. It's part jelly, part rubber, part tiny scream. You swallow it. You don't tell anyone. You carry that moment forever. Then there's tongue. A whole tongue. Boiled, peeled, sliced, served. The taste? Not terrible. But the preparation involves skinning the tongue like it owes you money. You once had to scrape the taste buds off with a dull knife while maintaining eye contact with your neighbour. No one spoke of it again. Brains are worse. Soft. Pale. Texturally indistinguishable from scrambled eggs, if scrambled eggs were haunted. You mash it into pies. Mix it with herbs. Pretend it's pâté. Lie to yourself. The butcher told you. It's good for the mind. You believed him. Until you started dreaming in Latin and forgot your own name. You've eaten lungs. Rubbery. Sponge-like. Cooked until chewy. Then chewed until your jaw joined a union. They don't taste like anything, but they feel like something. Something that once wheezed, and now sits on your plate as a reminder that breathing is not always a gift. Next, feet, chicken feet, pig feet, cow hooves, anything with toes, boiled into jelly, fried into nothing, or served cold with mustard and sorrow. You have to suck the meat off. You make eye contact with your food. It has toes. You keep going. Because hunger makes you do things. Things you said you'd never do, like gnaw on ankles. You've tried spleen. Not because you wanted to, because someone said it was medicinal. It tasted like a metallic apology from the inside of a goat. You seasoned it. You cried anyway. Then there's kidney pie. You've eaten it more than once. Not because you like it. Because people keep giving it to you with that look. The one that says, "This is all we have. Please pretend it's a gift." You chew. It's earthy. It's grainy. It's whispering something, but you don't want to know what. At one point, someone handed you a bowl of gallbladder soup. You said nothing. You drank it, because in this world, turning down food is worse than eating it. Refusing a gift means you think you're better. And you're not. You're hungry. So you say thank you. You sip the bile. You pretend it's peppery. You live. You've eaten meat so old it slid off the bone. You've eaten fat so thick you could bounce a coin off it. You've eaten organs that belonged to creatures you couldn't identify and chose not to. And the scariest part? You're getting used to it. By now, you've eaten more than most people cry about. You've swallowed texture you'll never emotionally recover from. You've bitten through guilt, cartilage, and the occasional chunk of something that made a sound when you chewed it. And yet, there's still one level lower. The food that isn't just disgusting. It's desperation incarnate. Welcome to famine food. The winter has dragged on. The stores are empty. The rats have already been eaten. Twice? And now you're looking at the stuff even the rats said no to. You boil bark. Not for flavour. For fibres. You chew until your jaw seizes. It tastes like tree regret. It does not digest. It does not matter. You mash acorns into a paste. They're bitter, poisonous if untreated. So you soak them for days, rinse them, mash them again. You mix them with flour to stretch your bread. The result is heavy, grey, slightly nutty, completely tragic. But it fills the hole where your sense of hope used to be. You try clay, yes, clay. You've heard rumours it helps settle the stomach. It doesn't. It just gives you a new set of problems. The kind that end with your body politely asking if you're trying to bury yourself from the inside. You eat shoe leather. Boiled, scraped, seasoned with nothing but regret and boiled laces. You lie to yourself. Tell the kids it's meat jerky. They cry anyway. You once watched a man roast a belt. Didn't even take the buckle off. Just turned it over a flame until it stopped smoking. He sliced it like pork. He chewed slowly. He survived. You still think about that belt. When things get truly bad, you eat anything. Grass, moss. A dead bird so old it no longer has feathers, just ideas. You dig through frozen ground for roots that don't fight back, and grubs fat enough to lie about. You chew, you gag. You keep chewing. Because the only thing worse than disgusting food is no food. One winter, someone in your village made stone soup. Not as a joke, not as a folktale, as a recipe. Water, a rock, some boiled twigs, a hint of mushroom from the dirt still stuck to someone's boot. It tasted like betrayal and heat. It kept you alive. Barely. There was that time when people boiled parchment. Animal skin scraped into scrolls. Usually reserved for writing. Now softened into something you could slurp like stew if you ignored the ink. You've eaten knowledge. And it still wasn't enough. Someone tried to eat soap just once. Didn't go well. The priest called it prideful cleansing. You called it what it was. Rock bottom brunch. And then, the final insult. The last, most disturbing course. You stop being disgusted. You bite into mouldy bread and shrug. You suck marrow from a cracked bone and smile. You boil feathers off an unidentifiable animal and say, well, at least it's warm. Because once your standards die, you finally have peace. And maybe parasites, but peace too. Food has stopped being food. It's now a ritual of survival. A daily roll of the dice between nourishment and nausea. A compromise between starvation and sanity. You don't eat to enjoy. You eat to avoid collapsing. You eat to prove you're still alive. You've made it. Somehow, against logic, mercy, and your own digestive tract, you've survived. You've eaten things that had no business being food. You've boiled bark. You've gnawed feet. You've tasted the blood of animals that probably died angry. And now you sit by a fire that barely crackles, staring into a bowl of something. You're not sure what it is. It has colour. It has texture. It has history. And you're going to eat it. Because you always do. You're not even hungry anymore. Not in the way you used to be. Now it's just routine. Chew, swallow, forget, chew, swallow, pretend. You don't ask what's in it. You don't ask who made it. You just lower your head and take your place at the altar of survival. There's a strange dignity in it. The kind that doesn't show up in books. The kind no bard sings about. You'll never be remembered as a hero. No monument will mention your stew. No tapestry will show your jaw moving like a cow chewing through centuries of disappointment. But you did it. You stayed alive. And that, in this time, in this world, was everything. You remember days when you didn't eat at all. Nights when you drank hot water and pretended it was broth. Mornings when you lied to your children and told them you already ate, just so they'd feel full for a second longer. You remember the taste of guilt more clearly than the taste of food. There were moments you almost gave up. The second winter of famine. The year your goat died and your only crop turned into grey mush. The week you ate the same broth so many times you started naming the bubbles. You once cried over a piece of cheese that was too mouldy to keep. You buried it like a pet, said a prayer, thought about it for months. You've stopped asking why the world is like this, why food is shame, why hunger is holiness, why every meal is a negotiation with cruelty. There are no answers, just calories, and you take them where you can. Sometimes you get a real meal, something warm, heavy, seasoned even. You eat it too fast. Your stomach rebels. Your brain panics. You forgot how to enjoy food. Now it feels like cheating, like smiling during a funeral. You look around, see who's watching, and quietly put the spoon down. You've become quiet, measured, grateful, not in the joyful sense, but in the way a prisoner is grateful for sunlight through a crack in the wall. You chew slowly. You finish every bite. You thank God, even if you're not sure he's listening. You once saw a noble spit out a roast duck because it was too dry. You saw a bishop push away a honeyed fig tart because it clashed with his fast. You watch people discard more in a day than you've eaten all week, and you felt nothing. Because feeling something, that's dangerous. That's how you end up bitter. Or worse, hopeful. And in this world, hope is a luxury, a garnish, something sprinkled lightly over someone else's plate. You don't dream about feasts anymore. You dream about enough. A full bowl, a piece of bread that doesn't crumble, a warm corner, a quiet stomach. Not joy, not pleasure, just peace. There's a moment, quiet, dusk-coloured, when you hand someone else your last bite. Not because you're full, not because you're generous, but because they're worse off than you. And for once, you don't want to feel alone in this kind of hunger. You've done it more than once. Split your bread in half, scraped the bottom of the pot and gave away the thicker part, saved the better piece of root vegetable for someone with shaking hands and sunken eyes. You didn't say anything, just passed the bowl. pretended not to watch them eat. That's the medieval version of love. You've seen parents starve for their children. You've seen older siblings lie about already eating. You've seen entire families stretch a bowl of broth so thin it was mostly memory. And yet, you've also seen laughter. Around those same tables. Around nothing but boiled barley and a prayer that didn't rhyme. Not joy, not comfort, but presence. A shared misery that somehow tasted better than solitude. Because eating, no matter how awful the meal, is less about taste than about ritual. A meal says, we're still here. We still have each other. This bite, this bowl, this soup made of regret and weeds, it still means something. Even now, you remember the good meals. All 3 of them. That time you got extra goose drippings from a generous neighbour. That weirdly sweet parsnip stew someone brought after a wedding. That hunk of cheese that didn't taste like a foot. Just like cheese. You still think about them. Hold them in your chest like treasures. Moments when food tasted like forgiveness. And sometimes you make peace with being hungry. You accept the ache, the way it shapes you, the way it humbles you, flattens your pride, carves your soul into someone who can recognize true need without speaking. There's a kind of clarity in it, a strange, cruel wisdom. Hunger teaches you to see clearly, to listen, to remember. You remember those who fed you when they didn't have to. The old woman who left stale bread on your doorstep in winter. The child who snuck you berries during Lent. The monk who shared his lentil gruel with a look that said, "Don't tell anyone." You remember their faces more than the food. Because kindness in famine is the only seasoning that stays with you. You've eaten meals next to graves. You've shared stew on plague days. You've broken bread with people who wouldn't live the week. And still, the meal mattered. It wasn't delicious. It wasn't nourishing, but it was real. Proof that even in suffering, we choose connection. Even in misery, we reach across the table. Even with nothing, we give. That's the worst part about getting used to this life. The way it makes you forget what food used to mean. Not just survival, but celebration, gathering, comfort, joy. Now, it's numbers, calories, scraps, silence. You look around at others still chewing, still scraping pots, still boiling stew that doesn't change. And you know, you are one of them. Not separate, not special. Just another hungry soul trying not to vanish. There comes a point, later than you'd expect, when food stops meaning anything at all. You don't hate it, you don't crave it, and you just eat it because you have to. It's fuel, barely. It's routine, mechanical. You chew like you're clocking in for a shift. You swallow like you're filing paperwork. No joy, no sorrow, just process. You can't remember the last time something tasted good. Not passable, not okay, good. Something that made your eyes close and your breath slow, if only for a second. You miss that second more than you miss actual meals. You miss the idea that food could be comforting. Now it just exists, and so do you. Barely. Taste fades. Not because your tongue stopped working, but because your brain stopped caring. It has more important things to worry about, like surviving the next frost, or whether the well is clean, or why the soup smells like old rope this week. Flavour becomes luxury, texture becomes pain, and hunger becomes permanent, a low hum behind your ribs that never goes quiet. You don't eat to feel better. You eat to avoid getting worse. Your body is tired. Your soul is tired. Even your appetite is tired. You stare at your food. It stares back. Neither of you flinch, and still somehow you keep eating, because if you stop, it means you've accepted it, and that would be worse. So you stir your pot of gruel, you scrape the bowl clean, you chew your crust of bread and pretend it's not soaked in mould and disappointment. You pretend, you survive, you pretend again. You don't talk about the meals you've lost. You don't talk about the people you lost them with. You don't talk about hope. It's too fragile, too dangerous. It might shatter in your mouth like cold broth in a cracked bowl. So you sit, you eat, and you endure. The candle burns lower, the coals turn grey. The wind whistles through the boards of your hut like it's looking for something to take. Your bowl is empty. Your spoon is quiet. Your hands are still. You lie down. Not full, not warm, just done. The day is over. The fire is dying. The hunger sleeps. Not gone, just waiting. You close your eyes. You don't say good night. You don't need to. Because in this time, in this world, sleep is the only true escape. You don't remember when meals stopped having beginnings or ends. There's no ceremony anymore. Just mouthfuls in the dark. A cold bowl. A crust too hard to bite, so whilst the soft ache of your stomach learning to be silent. You chew out of memory. You swallow out of habit. You sit because there's nowhere else to go. Tonight's meal? Gone? Did it fill you? No. But it didn't kill you either, so that's a win. Tomorrow you'll do it again. Gather scraps. Boil them. Eat them. Smile at someone who's pretending not to cry. You'll say it's not so bad. You'll mean it a little. The candle by your bedside flickers. The wind picks up outside. Your body curls like paper left too close to the fire. And still, you've made it. One more day, one more bowl, one more sleep, you lie down, not satisfied, not proud, but still here, eyes closed, hands folded, breath slow. The dark settles in around you like a blanket woven from smoke, and you fade with it. Quietly. Completely. Without needing to be remembered. Good night.